Despite the craziness, the big whale institutional investors like Tom Lee of Fundstrat, Cathie Wood of ARK Invest, Morgan Stanley, Dan Ives, and Gene Munster are still uber bullish on Tesla. We'll watch several interviews. First, Tom Lee says the long-term picture has not changed, and he lists out all the reasons he's bullish. Second, Cathie Wood, when asked if there was one stock you could pick, which would it be? She says it's Tesla, still sticking with their price target of $2,600 by 2030. Third, Morgan Stanley also stayed the course with their $410 price target and $800 bull case, despite the short-term volatility. And finally, both Dan Ives and Gene Munster remain bullish despite the Musk-Trump feud. Cern Basher is a chartered financial analyst who's currently running his own investment advisory firm called BrilliantAdvice, providing wealth management services. Welcome, Cern.
Hi, Herbert. Yeah, it's always to critique other investment folks. That's always fun. I think we'll have some interesting comments today.
Right. It's interesting, though, right? So that you normally, bad news, stock price goes down, analysts come out and they just revise and they're negative. This one, right? We actually had pretty turmoil, volatile weekend, Musk, Elon, Trump having a feud, but everyone's still staying the course. So there are people who sees signal and they see noise and they see what happened on the weekend was just noise, as you have been saying as well. One of the people we love to watch is Tom Lee. Let's listen into his thinking about what's happening.
Hi there, this is Tom Lee. I'm the Chief Investment Officer of Fundstrat Capital and the lead portfolio manager for Fundstrat's U.S. Large Cap Granny Shots ETF, ticker GRNY. This is the update for the week of June 5th. First, let me cover some particulars. At the end of the period, price was $20.81, net asset value of $20.83, and total assets of $1.12 billion. For the past week, Granny Shots rose 1.7%, while the S&P rose 1.9%, or roughly 22 basis points of underperformance. Year to date, Granny Shots is outperforming the S&P 500 by 450 basis points. And as you can see here, in each of the last 3 months, Granny Shots has outperformed the S&P 500. On today's macro, I do want to just focus on the feud between President Trump and Elon Musk and its effect on Tesla, which is a Granny Shot. The dispute has a lot to do with President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill. Elon Musk has claimed it is expanding the deficit and it's wasteful. And of course, this would lead to a feud. And it escalated fairly quickly on Thursday. It started with, again, the usual criticism by Musk, and President Trump then said Elon was wearing thin and claimed Elon Musk was just upset because the EV mandates were eliminated. Now, this enraged Elon Musk, who called him a liar, and Trump responded by saying that they would end government subsidies and contracts with Elon Musk. And then Elon Musk took this another step and said that President Trump is in the Epstein files, and of course, this took it to another level. And President Trump didn't escalate it from there. He just says, you kind of wish Elon Musk had left earlier. And then Elon followed up his tweet with another saying that he is going to decommission the Dragon spacecraft immediately. So, of course, this got many people worried that this needs to de-escalate quickly. Now, Bill Ackman, for instance, said he supports both sides and that it's better to make peace. And Elon actually responded to that saying, you're not wrong. And Elon showed some humor. This is a tweet about DNC headquarters, and Elon Musk responded but with a laugh. And even somebody with only 17 followers said, this is a shame, this back and forth. You're both better than this. Cool off and take a step back for a couple of days. And Elon Musk responded with, good advice. Okay, we won't decommission Dragon. So it looks like things are cooling off on Elon Musk's side, but there was a lot of damage to Tesla shareholders. It started with Elon's tweet about the Epstein files. Tesla, which has been down roughly 7% from its highs, fell 14% almost immediately after that tweet. And that's because investors thought this was actually taking this to a new level. And of course, I think Tesla investors are used to this. But if you take a step back and look at Tesla from its 2010 to now, when it went from $1 to $280 today, that decline that we're seeing recently really looks like it's just coming back to support. So I don't think the long-term picture really has changed all that much for Tesla. And let's just review the competitive strength. Tesla has a lead in EV design, a lead in manufacturing electric vehicles. They have a robotaxi product coming soon. It's going to start next week. And they have a competitive, vastly more competitive robotaxi design that costs roughly 1/4 that of the nearest competitor. And Tesla is planning to launch or to introduce Optimus robots that actually have not only finger dexterity, but as you may have seen in some of these videos, a lot of movement dexterity. And of course, there are drones potentially in the future. So when you look at the suite of products that Tesla has, it is pretty unmatched. And then there's the possibility that they may merge xAI, which is their AI unit, which also owns the platform x.com, formerly known as Twitter. And with all that, I would say that Tesla, of course, still holds all of its advantages. And so we aren't too concerned about the decline. Now, I thought we'd visit a name that fell last week.
Okay. That's what he said about Tesla. I think the end there was a little bit speculative of xAI merger drones, but at the end of the day, he did list out quite a number of bullish. Victor, he's still looking at future. What's your thinking of what he said?
Well, first of all, I thought he did a nice recap of sort of the back and forth between Elon and Trump. And again, with the benefit of a little bit of time, I still believe that this whole thing was a concocted show, but that remains to be seen. Well, we may never know. And it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. The damage has been done in terms of how it's impacted the Tesla stock in the short term. But I think that Tom did a nice job, I think, of sort of summarizing, what investors should be focused on. And by the way, he could have also mentioned energy. He could have also mentioned Dojo. He could have mentioned semi. There's a whole host of other things to be excited about in Tesla's future. And so, to the extent that there are some near-term challenges, the value of a company is based on the present value of its future earnings. It has nothing to do with what it's done in the past and really even where it is today. So I think Tom is rightly focused on that. And so I thought his comments there were very well placed.
Yeah, Tom is still very bullish. It's part of his granny shot ETF. So of course he's going to be biased with that. He still thinks it's true, but it's nice to hear when you've got these people, just not they're not concerned. They weren't moved by this big concern. Last time this happened, you had Dan Ives and others really concerned about Elon and what he's doing with Doge. Surprisingly, we'll talk about that later, what his response was. And this time he was a little bit more muted. We've got Cathie Wood. Cathie is ARK Invest, big Tesla investors. And again, she was just interviewed and she's also saying very positive things. She was asked the question, what if you could only pick one stock, which one would you do? And she interestingly chose Tesla, right? Cathie Wood says if she could only pick one stock to invest in, she would choose Tesla. It's a convergence of our three major platforms, robots, energy storage, and AI. It's not stopping with robotaxis. There's a story beyond that with humanoid robots. And our $2,600 price target by 2030 has nothing to do with humanoid robots. We just thought it would be an investment, period. So let's listen to what she says.
If I just had to invest in one stock right now, what stock would you recommend I invested in?
Okay, well, I have to give you our
your portfolio.
Top pick.
So it would be Tesla.
It would be Tesla if I had to give you one stock.
Okay, interesting.
Because think about it. It is a convergence among three of our major platforms. So robots, energy storage, AI. And it's not stopping with robotaxis. There's a story beyond that with humanoid robots. And our $2,600 number has nothing for humanoid robots. We just thought it'd be an investment period. And, but I think he's going to start generating not only productivity gains internally, but revenues from humanoid robots.
What's your thoughts, Cern?
Yeah. I mean, Cathie has been extremely consistent in her views, and I think rightly so. I can't wait until they begin to include humanoid bots in their model. I thought her comment about, they recognize humanoid bots, but they, their price target out to 2030, they didn't include humanoids because they saw that as an investment period. And it sounds like, when she means investment period, a period of time where the company is investing in developing the bot and not focused on selling it, right? There's no revenues coming from the bot until after 2030. It sounds like to me that they may be rethinking that and perhaps realizing that there will be revenues from Optimus prior to 2030. And if that's the case, then at some point they will need to model it, and they need to include that in their model. And I think that's going to be very interesting when they do that. I'm looking forward to reading that research. Again, I think we know what it's going to say, but Cathie has a very wide audience. So I think a lot of people, will have their eyes opened when they read ARK's research on humanoids, whenever that day comes. But, I think her other point about Tesla being at that convergence point of, autonomy, energy storage, and AI, I think is a very important point. Most of us realize that AI is going to be something that changes the world in profound ways. And so here's Tesla at a convergence point, at a key sort of junction, and one of the companies that is going to make all these things happen and transform many industries. Autonomous vehicles, again, we've talked about the profound impact that autonomous vehicles are going to have on absolutely everything. I wrote a post this weekend about how autonomous vehicles will impact the crude oil refiners and everything downstream of that. And perhaps we'll even do a show on that because I think there's enough there to talk about. But a lot of people don't realize how autonomous vehicles are going to reshape so many things. How our world has been structured around internal combustion engine vehicles and what that's done for the world and how this will change that. Cathie Wood, I think, recognizes that change. And on top of that, you have company providing the energy storage systems that we need increasingly for AI data centers. And then, of course, humanoid robots. So yes, if you were to pick one company, this would be a natural one to pick, albeit with a lot of volatility, albeit with, there's some challenges around Tesla that you don't have with a typical company because of its outspoken CEO. And you know what? That comes with the territory. And it may also be important because anytime you're making such a big change from one system to the other, as Tony Seba has talked about, you need somebody who can look out into the future and sort of try to pave the way for what's coming. And as much as people, I think, criticize Elon for his political viewpoints, a lot of people now are saying that, well, we may not have freedom of speech in the United States if he hadn't bought Twitter. Maybe that statement's a stretch. Maybe that's not entirely true, but I think certainly X as a free speech platform has made a big difference. And so Elon, I think, pushing so hard on some of these political avenues, this may be another example of people in future years looking back and saying, you know what, we're glad he did that. Investors are suffering for it in the short term. Sure, right? Extra volatility in the stock. But with what Cathie is saying in terms of how the company is positioned, that is absolutely true.
Okay, so we have a second clip of Cathie Wood. She's still very bullish. Here we've got her saying that she still picks Tesla to reach $2,600 by 2030. She's bullish on robotaxi.
Our prediction in 5 years is 2,600. And 90% of that valuation comes not from the electric vehicle, but from this robotaxi platform. Because the electric car, if you think about it, is, a one-shot sale. Sell and hope they come back when they're replacing their car.
Thoughts on that, Cern?
Well, I think she's absolutely right. We've talked about this before, that the nature of Tesla's business model is a dramatic change, right? From, as she mentioned, a one-time sale where you hope the customer comes back to buy another vehicle from you in a few years, to a autonomous vehicle network that is recurring revenue. It's such a massive change in Tesla's business model. And this is where this idea of, Tesla's not just a car company comes from, right? It's truly becomes a transportation company with a completely different profitability and margin profile than what it currently has.
Yeah. We got Morgan Stanley also saying something very similar. They're still very much bullish on Tesla again, very surprisingly. Short-term volatility, long-term bullish. They have an overweight rating. They're going to continue their $410 price target, $800 bull case. EV tax credit cuts, not a major long-term issue. Musk-Trump feud may temporarily impact demand. Tesla's AI, robotics, and energy strengths remain strong. Near-term volatility expected, but long-term growth undervalued. This was their kind of note that they made. This is Adam Jonas. Wanted to share a few pith and marrow thoughts in the wake of public disagreement between Elon and President Trump. And this is where basically she said that credits. We do not believe that phasing out of EV tax credits from the BBB is material to the long-term outlook. We believe Tesla's recent 50% rally was driven primarily by hopes that Elon would refocus time and attention on Tesla. While the situation remains fluid, we believe the disagreement will not help Tesla demand, but could potentially temporarily alienate multiple sides of the political spectrum. So they get that bigger picture. Emotions are running high. We're not convinced the longer-term vectors that drive the stock's value have changed here. AI leadership, autonomy robotics, manufacturing, supply chain re-architecture, renewable power, critical infrastructure. Tesla still holds so many valuable cards that are largely apolitical. Okay. Volatility, when putting our trading cap on, we have higher conviction in near-term volatility than near-term direction, but long-term, 410, prepared for the stock to give up more than just the 4 weeks of performance it has sacrificed so far. They do expect it to fall more, but they still remain overweight. Yeah. Thoughts on this?
Yeah, and they have a bull case there, price target of 800, and a bear case, I guess, of 200. They've given themselves sufficiently large wiggle room. But yeah, no, I think they're highlighting the things that are on everybody's mind. You know, Elon has talked about the tax credits before for EVs. He'd prefer that there wasn't any to begin with. He's been consistently saying that for a long, long time. You know, and I think he also hopes that to the extent that the government subsidizes things, that that's a level playing field for everybody, and you don't just subsidize oil and gas and not EVs, or vice versa. So I think that's something that's a bit disappointing. In the end, the marketplace will win out if Tesla and other EV makers can make a compelling product at the right price. Then consumers will purchase that product. We're probably beyond the point now where we really need government support to get the EV market going. And of course, as Tesla's on the cusp of autonomy, that makes the idea of trying to sell EVs a whole lot less important. Right? If you need tax credits so that people can afford EVs, then we have an even cheaper option for them in the form of a robotaxi. In terms of getting rides. They don't even have to buy the vehicle. They can just pay for the ride. So I think he's right about the long-term impact of EV credits. You know, in terms of alienating potential buyers, I guess Elon now has done a good job of alienating both the left and the right. So, you know, I suppose one could be cynical and say, well, are there any customers left? You know, I think this whole notion of demand destruction from when Elon was involved in Doge, certainly there was some of that, but, you know, it probably picked up a lot of other people as well. Is this situation one of those demand destruction episodes? I don't really see that in this case, in my opinion. You know, if anything, at this point, I think that some people might be sympathetic to the way that Elon's been treated, but who knows? We'll have to see how that comes out. In terms of volatility, you know, the stock is volatile. It always has been. Nothing has really changed there. And so that's probably why Morgan Stanley has such a wide price target range from 200 to 800. You know, as I mentioned, you could drive a bus through that. Right? The whole game for me of setting price targets that are, you know, 1 year out or something like that is kind of silly in my opinion, but that's what Wall Street does. I much prefer ARK Invest's approach where you've got a longer term target rather than worry about, you know, where the stock is in the short term. But no, I think that what Adam Jonas wrote in that report is largely correct.
Yeah, I agree. That was a very good report. It was very detailed and listed out all the things why, you know, it's, yes, volatility, yes, a concern for cars, but everything else is still on track. So we'll track that. You know, here we got Dan Ives. He has been somebody who was very upset about what happened with Doge and believing that Elon created a, you know, brand damage significantly. He was pleading for Elon to stop and get back into the business, which he did. But now, surprisingly, he, of all things, this Trump-Musk feud is one that he going from BFFs to frenemies does not change our bullish view of the autonomous path looking forward. Trump, we still expect to have green light regulatory federal framework for autonomous looking forward, regardless of this feud. Musk driving Tesla's AF future. So, do you think that that's true? That nothing's changed in terms of the path forward for regulatory federal framework for autonomous?
Well, I certainly hope that's true. again, I don't see any reason that this feud would really change that unless, Trump decides to make it really personal, much like the Biden administration had appeared to have done with Elon. I don't really see the Trump administration doing that with Elon. Again, that's a risk, but I think it's a small one. So yeah, I think as he says, the autonomous path that the company is on still leads to the opportunity.
Good to hear Dan saying that. And then Gene Munster saying something very similar. Also, Gene Munster of Deepwater, he remains bullish on Tesla despite Elon Musk-Donald Trump feud. Very interesting reactions by the institutional analysts.
Becky, I think it was an overreaction, and ultimately, Andrew really hit the pressure point on the head, and I just want to zero in on that. What's at play here is this treatment that Tesla, or Waymo for that matter, may have with the federal government, NHTSA specifically, in terms of making it easier for autonomous vehicles to become widespread. And this, of course, was the impetus for Tesla's move in valuation, $900 billion today. And that's why the stock is down, that's somehow put in jeopardy because of what happened yesterday. But my view that this is an overreaction comes from a position that ultimately I think that the president wants to do what is right for the country, despite I think all the personalities between the two and wanting to get a kind of a one-upsmanship. I think that the president does want to do what's right for the country. And when you think about AI and this arms race, I mean, undoubtedly this is a new frontier in terms of global power. And the physical AI piece is one manifestation of that. And the most obvious example of that is going to be with autonomy. So just to kind of play this forward, let's take the position that Trump is more punitive to Elon. It makes it more difficult for autonomous. And then we look around and we see autonomous vehicles in China everywhere. I'm fast forwarding 1 to 5 years from now. And in Europe and the rest of the world, it would be a little bit odd, I think, for this personality blow up to really slow down that pace of innovation. And so ultimately, I think that what is best for the country is for autonomy to move forward. And I think that means that this is going to continue to move forward. Obviously comes at a big time with Tesla next week and what we're going to hear from Austin.
Interesting comments. That's what many of us are saying as well. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think that at this point, Gene is saying what everybody else has been saying, right? I think that anybody that looks at the situation with any sort of objective viewpoint sees the trajectory that Tesla is on and sees very little likelihood of this, issue with Trump being a material issue. There's a lot to look forward to with Tesla and where they're going. And we're all excited to see what is unveiled this month in Austin, Texas, and where that leads the company in the coming quarters, coming years. So I think that all these analysts are correct in their assessment and that they're focused on the right thing. Again, it's this whole issue between signal and noise, and what's the signal and what's the noise. I think everybody is pretty clearly seeing the signal here.
Yeah, in a show we did earlier, we shared that there was a net $201 million of Tesla stock being bought by retail investors right during the period of the volatility. And so it sounds like even though we hear some Tesla bulls saying, hey, their conviction has been rocked, actually, there's a lot of people buying Tesla stock. There's a lot of the analysts here still seeing the future. That hasn't changed. So it's good to kind of just give a sense of what's actually happening. This can change any minute. Of course, sentiment can change very quickly. And so I think we still expect, right, short-term volatility. But the question, and you need to be tracking this very closely, is do you think that the future has changed? Has anything there changed? Autonomous vehicle, maybe slow down. Maybe there could be some sort of, if it carries forward some sort of retaliatory regulatory framework thing, but at the end of the day, it's not going to stop it. That's where most people are still sitting today, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that makes a lot of sense because the need for autonomous vehicles has not changed, right? If anything, the need only grows over time. The reality is we have a lot of people losing their lives on the roads every single year. Humans are very distracted, in many cases, absolutely terrible drivers. Most people are already telling us what they want to do with their time. They want to be on their phones. Now, unfortunately, they choose to drive their car and be on their phone at the same time because they think that they're capable of doing that, not recognizing that perhaps when you're going 60, 65, 80 miles an hour, that's a very dangerous activity to do. Things can happen very quickly, even at very low speeds. And so the need for autonomous vehicles hasn't changed. It's also going to reduce the cost of transportation, and that will have a positive effect on the economy in so many different levels. So, yeah, I mean, the demand driver for it is still there. And it's just a matter, I think, of getting through some of these bumps.
Yeah. Let's see what happens. Very exciting. I wouldn't say exciting, just good to hear that this is still the general thinking here, future focused. Follow Cern, a chartered financial analyst. He has an investment advisory firm called BrilliantAdvice. Checking them out at brilliantadvice.net. Thanks, Cern.
Thanks, Herbert.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.